Alternative Radio.
Texas History Lessons presents an occasional daily dose of Texas history with your host, Michael.
April 21st is a big day in Texas history. And many of you know why it is such a significant day already. But a few of you might be scratching your head and wondering, gee, why is April 21st so important? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I have the answer. April 21st is the day that Louis Wigfall, the Texas fire eater and Confederate State Senator from Texas, was born in Edgefield, South Carolina. Okay, that's obviously a joke. It really is his birthday, but I definitely would not be celebrating him on this episode. April 21st is San Jacinto Day. What does that mean? Well, on April 21st, 1836, after a lot of miserable experiences, constant retreating, and a lot of questions being raised about Sam Houston's decision-making and nerve, the Texas Army routed the Mexican Army, led by General Antonio de Padua, María, Severino, López de Santa Anna, y Pérez de Lebrón. Usually just called Santa Anna here in Texas. And that occurred at the Battle of San Jacinto. Now, this victory came at a very good time because people all over Texas were in a panic, and the future for them looked grim. Houston himself was constantly disappointed at the turnout of Texas men to fight with him, and issued many calls for Texans to step up, get rid of their cowardice, and fight for independence. Many Texans were, however, too busy fleeing with their families and possessions in what we call a runaway scrape towards safety in the east. Some, even to this day, thought that Houston himself was fleeing to the east with hopes of pulling the United States Army across the border to help and save him and his army. The interim president of Texas, President Burnett, himself had no faith in Houston and would hate Houston for years to come. One thing to remember is there was no unified, everybody loving each other on one side of this cause, because the political tension immediately after this battle would continue for a long time and continues even today. We've always been divided, but I digress. The bloodletting of the Texas rebels at Goliad and at the Alamo had fired up many soldiers for revenge, and probably also caused a little concern for some about what might happen if they came out to be on the losing end of the conflict, if they ever got to fight, which is what most of them wanted. The fact of the matter is that people were concerned because Houston had not been very open about his real plans and goals. Most of the men wanted to fight and frequently voiced their disillusionment. Somehow Houston maintained control over his forces, and that all came to an end on April 21st, 1836. On April 17th, Houston and the Army had taken the road to Harrisburg instead of the road of retreat to Louisiana. Houston detractors from 1836 on to this day often say that the troops made the decision for him. That will, I think, remain a mystery of history. On April 18th, they reached White Oak Bayou near modern-day Houston's city limits, and General Houston learned that Santa Anna had traveled down the west side of the bayou and the San Jacinto River. It was here that General Sam Houston learned that Santa Anna had crossed the bridge over Vince's Bayou and gone down the west side of the bayou in the San Jacinto River. Now, the Mexican army would have to cross that bridge to return. On April 19th, Houston addressed the men and told them to remember the Alamo and Goliad massacres because retribution was at hand. Houston and the army crossed Buffalo Bayou on April 19th and then proceeded to march until midnight. And then at dawn, the army continued to march and ultimately camped about a mile up the road from Lynch's Ferry in a skirt of timber that provided some protection. Santa Anna positioned his army about 3/4 of a mile from the Texas camp. Both sides readied for combat. Unfortunately, Houston and the Texans learned that General Cos had arrived, and now Santa Anna had about 1,200 soldiers compared to Houston's 910. Houston then had Erastus Deaf Smith destroy Vince's Bridge. Neither the Texians or the Mexicans could easily retreat to Harrisburg. Hidden in part by trees on the rising ground, Houston had his forces take position about 3:30 in the afternoon. And with cries of "Remember the Alamo" and "Remember Goliad," the Texas army lunged forward. 18 minutes later, the bloodbath of a battle was over. This time the Texans were victorious. The Texian officers lost control of the men during the battle, and the violence reached a terrifying level. And in the end, Houston's report states that 630 Mexicans were dead and 730 had been taken prisoner in 18 minutes. The Texian army lost 9 killed or mortally wounded, and 30 soldiers were wounded but would go on to live. Houston himself had his ankle shattered by a musket ball during the combat, and Santa Anna disappeared during the bloodshed, but he would be eventually captured, and Texans would base their independence on the 2 treaties Santa Anna would sign in future days from April 21st. So there you go. That, in a nutshell, is why April 21st is celebrated across the state of Texas. That's going to be your daily dose of Texas history. We'll be back soon with more.